I'll do my best. First of all, I want to thank the sheriffs for coming out and their support. They are a part of the over 340 sheriffs around this nation that have signed to uphold your rights. I also want to take a moment to first thank all of the law enforcement that came out today. Thank you for your service, and thank you for keeping us safe today, even though the inside's not on. And now I'm going to apologize to them because I'm going to pick on your leader a little bit, but before we talk about, they asked me out here obviously to talk about the Second Amendment, but before I get to that, I had a great business idea the other day, and I wanted to run it by you guys and see what you thought of it. See, there's this representative in Colorado, and I don't remember her name, it's kind of irrelevant anyway, but she was talking about the Second Amendment, she was talking about gun control, and she said something that light bulb just went off in my head and said, this is a great business idea. What an opportunity to tap the Second Amendment crowd. All of you folks, actually. She made it a point, and by the way, she says that she's worked on this for a very, very, very long time, many, many years, so she's got a wealth of knowledge in all of this. And she's talking to at a public forum, and there's this older gentleman who happens to be disabled, and he stands up and he's talking about the 10-round magazine limitations being proposed in Colorado as well as around the country. And he says, I'm disabled. It's a good chance that a couple of my rounds aren't going to find their target. But if 2 or 3 people come into my house, what about me? She had a very, very informative answer, I believe, and that's where the business opportunity just kind of popped into my head. I'm an entrepreneur. And she said, well, when we talk about these magazines, you won't have to worry about the bad guys having more than 10 rounds, because when they use the magazine, these are bullets, these are ammunition, then we'll just throw them away. Eventually the 30-round magazines are going to go away. And eureka, right? Instant business opportunity. What if we made magazines reloadable? Now, I do live radio. I screw up, was properly taken to task by some libertarians for some comments I made on Friday. And so we screw up. We do that. Live television, live radio, it happens. When you're giving a public address, it happens. So maybe she just misspoke. It's possible. She was referring to something else, the magazine thing just got in there. She's nervous, she's on television, guys. So she sent out her communications director. And her communications director made sure that we all understood that she was in fact mistaken. She was just nervous. She misspoke, and she said, no, she was talking about clips. Second business idea. I've said this many times on the program. For those of you who listen on a regular basis, you've heard me say it. The debate and discussion that we are having right now, our opponents couldn't tell the difference between a 40 caliber and a 40-ounce beer. They don't know the difference. That includes anchors on Fox News. When the tragic shooting in Newtown happened, Megyn Kelly, who I happen to be a fan of, did not understand what a 223 was. And I watched for several hours as she was trying to ask people, what is a 223? Now, I'm sorry, she's been in the news a long time. I would have assumed she would have run across this information at some point in time. I said I like her a lot. That doesn't mean she knows what she's talking about. And in spite of the fact that I have South Bend's finest behind me, I had an encounter with the brand new police chief a few weeks back. Some of you might have seen it, heard about it. Some of you might have even showed up at the meeting for the council and responded to it. I know a couple of you, I see you out there, you guys actually did respond to it. I was invited to WNIT to be their pro-gun guy. Apparently the host was having some difficulty finding one in Indiana. That's what I'm told. So I said, I'll be the pro-gun guy. Sure, never seen the show before and didn't know anything about her and knew she was a professor. And so I went and I knew full well what I was getting into. It was 3 against 1. Including the new police chief of South Bend, who at the time, by the way, I introduced myself and said, I'm really glad you're here, actually. Because my audience, many of you knew where Sheriff Rogers stood. You didn't know where the new police chief of South Bend stood, and you wanted to know. I think it's a legitimate question. We didn't know anything about him. He's new to the community, and so I introduced myself, so I'm really glad you're here. I said, many members of my audience have been emailing me and calling me and saying, hey, where does the new police chief stand on it? I didn't know. I found out before the show started. I did a quick little poll of people who were there who had served in the military. Just curiosity, anybody else here served in the military? And one guy said yes, but he was a pencil pusher in the military, nothing wrong with that. Another man said no. And the sheriff looked at me and slouched down and leaned forward. It was very odd. Slouched down, leaned forward, and he turned his head to the side. And he changed his voice and he goes, "No. I've spent my entire adult life in," this is how he said it, "peaceable law enforcement." I thought that was an interesting commentary on where he was going to stand that day, so I instantly knew it was 3 against 1. I didn't find out, believe it or not, until the Storm Chaser giveaway Thursday night that something else had happened several days before. I just found this out this Thursday. Somebody who will remain anonymous happened to have done, they were in the hosts of the show's presence, who, by the way, I think did a fine job that day. I don't want anybody to mistake that I'm attacking the host or WNIT or anything. I was told that the host was scared of me. Apparently she had heard a little bit about me, didn't know much about me. I don't know if she'd ever even listened to the show. She was concerned. One of the other people on the panelists was a video producer. Why he was there, I don't know. Concerned citizen, I guess. She was concerned that I was going to, quote, bury him. And she would have to jump in and protect him. And that her unbiased nature as the host of the program would thereby be somewhat suspect. Now, I thought that was really interesting because of some things that was said to me by both members of the Common Council as well as some people that were at that very table as I spent the next hour disproving all of the myths that these 3 individuals, including the new police chief of South Bend, had started throwing out there. One of them being that all law enforcement is on their side and disagrees with me. A lot of people had some feedback on that show. And a lot of people said, "Casey, how on earth did you keep your cool?" I don't know. What kept you from throwing a chair at these people? What kept you from lashing out and being angry and being aggressive? I went in there specifically to not do that. And you're going to understand why here in just a couple of minutes. I specifically said I'm going to go in there and I'm going to be the nice, reasonable, even-keeled guy. That's what I'm going to be. Main reasons are this is my position anyway, is a nice, reasonable point of view. Theirs isn't. So as I sat there and I was basically disregarding the other two and focusing specifically on the chief because of some of the things that he was saying, which were factually incorrect. I do like how they've been ruling, the Supreme Court, the latest ruling against gun control. You notice how they twisted that to kind of mean that, yeah, by the way, we can't put limitations on your Second Amendment right. Okay, the ruling was against you, but all right, that's fine. At the end of the discussion, and I won't go into all of it. If you want to go see the video, you can. It's online. At the end of it, I had one of the individuals who was there to disagree with me lean over to me after the cameras were off, and he said, "I wish more people argued the way that you did for your position. You've given me something to think about." The next day, I took a phone call from a member of the Common Council who I had previously been disagreeing with on this issue on Facebook, and we're friendly with one another. I'm not friends with hardly any politicians, but we're friendly with one another. And he said, "Until I heard you say the things that you said on television that day, I would have never been in favor of the things that you are talking about. And the things that you said gave me something to think about. Casey, I think I've changed my mind." Was it as fun as throwing chairs? No. Throwing chairs is pretty fun stuff. But I got 2 individuals who disagreed with me the week before, the day before, the day of, to reevaluate their position. And I didn't do it by yelling at them. I didn't do it by going, "It's my gun, I'll kill anybody I want." I didn't do that. Although that's funny, don't get me wrong. I didn't do it by saying our president is a communist or a socialist, and you might think that's true. I didn't do that because I wanted some kind of congratulations or anything like that. I did it because I honestly felt that it would work. And for at least 2 individuals, it did. That's how we have to formulate our arguments. The things that you have to remember. You're right. It's not a matter of opinion. Opinions, different people can be right, different people can be wrong. We're going to disagree on that all day. You are factually correct. There is a convenient myth that has been permeated from Dianne Feinstein, that dink in Colorado, the lady who replaced Jesse Jackson Jr. in Illinois, who said, hey, concealed carry doesn't work in Colorado. Look at what happened in Aurora. Everybody failed to pull out their guns, even the military guys over there. For those of you who don't know, in Colorado, if they say no weapons are allowed, it's enforceable by law, and that happened to be the only movie theater within 20 minutes of that man's house that was, you're not allowed to carry a firearm. There's a reason he chose it. When you make your arguments reasoned, they have no choice but at least consider it. Now, you're going to run into people that have something called confirmation bias. You guys heard of confirmation bias before? Confirmation bias is an actual psychological term. That means, doesn't matter if you actually point at the sky and go, that there's blue. They will say it's pink until the day they die. And they will come up with any argument, any theory, any conspiracy to prove that point. You will have those people when you have this discussion and this debate. Anybody listen to my show and heard the caller Rich a couple weeks ago? Yeah. I got in some trouble for going long with Rich. I went 15 minutes long in that segment specifically to let Rich say what he wanted to say. Now, for those of you who didn't hear it, Rich hates the Second Amendment. Rich hates guns, hates firearms, hates all of you, hates me. And he called up and he did, you know, what we always hear. Second Amendment does not give each citizen the right to own a firearm. That's a myth. It's only for the National Guard. And that's how he started the call. National Guard didn't exist until the early 1900s, but, you know, who's counting? So I mentioned that. And they go, why do you need a 30-round magazine to hunt a deer? I don't. Why do you need a Prius? Well, most people only use 1 or 2 rounds. Yeah, that's true. In fact, in some states, they only give you 1 or 2 rounds to actually hunt the deer to make it more sporting. So what? It's irrelevant. My concern is the Korean shopkeepers in the LA riots. My concern is that guy in the LA riots. Remember him standing on the top of his house at an AR-15? Kept a mob of people from savaging his home and his family and himself? Remember the truck driver pulled out of his truck and beaten within an inch of his life? He didn't have an AR-15, did he? Dianne Feinstein saw Mayor Milk get assassinated right in front of her. She's got absolute moral authority. Yeah, he was shot with a revolver. Not talking about revolvers right now, are we? Virginia Tech happened. Of course, no aggressively styled hunting rifles were involved in that incident. But before that story was even done, and before we knew how many shooters were out there, they were talking about banning AK-47s and AR-15s and everything you could possibly think of, weren't they? Still do! You know how many people died in 2011 from an aggressively styled hunting rifle? For those of you who don't listen to my program, that would be the AR-15s, AK-47s. 158. 2011, 158 people were non-justifiably killed with one of these so-called assault rifles. Now, that's 158 lives that I, like many of you, mourn. Those are innocent people that were killed unjustifiably. The problem is, hunting rifles killed more. Shotguns killed more, and we all know that handguns killed a heck of a lot more. But so did hammers and baseball bats and poison and your fist, by the way. They all killed more people than the assault rifles that they're talking about right now. That's all according to the FBI. And as things went on, Rich kept going on to the old myths. See, I'm back to Rich. He gave me a lot of information. We have more murders here than anywhere else in the entire world. Not true. In fact, the United Nations studied it and said we're middle of the road, even for westernized industrial nations when it comes to violent crime. Well, why do you need a 30-round magazine to hunt a deer? He went back to that point. Okay. Again, I don't. What type of shirt you wear? Why do you do that?